So this is our second episode of our talk show that we have started. In the first episode, we have discussed everything about the Ram Mandir Ayodhya dispute. Okay. So today we are going to see about India's growth prospects in the upcoming decades. We'll see the tight competition that is going to happen between the three biggies of the world economy, that is US, China and India. But normally people think about these two, but how come India be here? Like, we know that these are already giants, but what makes India to stand at this position to compete with USA and China? We know that India is just another developing country, but there are some differences that make it stand apart or make it an outstanding country. Like, where are the other developing countries and where are the other European countries to compete with China and US? Like, why India is there? What is the significance of India, or what makes India stand in an outstanding position? Like, first we will see what are the prospects and potentials of India. What is the significance of India in the present world? Then we will see its economic prospects. Like, even the features that we are going to see before the economic prospects, even that contributes to our economic might. First of all, we are at the sweet spot of 18%, like occupying like 18% of the world population is there in our country. That means if you are rounding it to 20%, that means if you take randomly 5 persons in the world globally, you are picking 1 person will be an Indian. Okay, so that much demographic potential is there for us. Then other significant advantages: the biggest hits or the biggest movies are being produced in our country, which are collecting very high revenue. Not only the big ticket Bollywood movies, but from the regional languages also, we are getting huge fan following movies, which is having huge high quality content, like based on its story, direction, its performances, everything. There is a huge fan following for our regional movies as well. Then it is the country where cricket is considered as the second religion, and obviously where the god of cricket lives, and a country which has contributed much to the sport of cricket, and it has created legends over each and every decades, and it has contributed like significant iconic moments in the cricketing history of the world. Then it is the country where yoga developed, and it is to this country that foreigners are arriving in millions to learn the practice of breathing, concentration, mindfulness and meditation. So that is one significant advantage. Then obviously, needless to say, that it is the land where magnanimous architecture is present. Actually, whatever things that I am saying, you have to keep in mind that this will be helping you in your prelims, mains and interview. Like in interview, obviously, for making opinion based questions, you need to know everything about this. And you know, from the cave architecture to Taj Mahal to our recent Patel statue, and even obviously our neighborhood Jadayu, are architectural wonders. Then each and every inch of our country is having its own cuisine. Okay, sweet, mouth-watering cuisines are there in almost all regions of the country. Like, for this, people are arriving from other countries to taste a bit of India. Then we know that it is the land where almost all the religions that are practiced in the world is there. Okay, and not only the global religions, we have hundreds of numerous small and big religions and religious practices are there, even in the north, south, west, middle and even the northeastern part of our country. So that is there. Then it is the country where innumerable number of inventions and contributions has happened regarding the contribution of pi, zero, the innumerable number of contributions to the astronomical arena. And it is the land where the stalwart of Ayurveda, that is Charaka, lived, and the country which has contributed Shushruta, who is the father of the surgery. Then obviously the land which has contributed to the game of Chaduranga or chess to the world. And it is the country where Kumbh Mela or Mahakumbh is happening. At the holiest site of that particular region, around 15 crore or 150 million people are getting assembled in that congregation ceremony, and it is even viewed from the space because of this humongous population that is participating in one particular area and one particular moment of time. And according to Mark Twain, India is the cradle of human race, the birthplace of human speech, and the mother of history, and the grandmother of legend, and the great grandmother of tradition. So these are the soft power advantages and potential of our country. But it doesn't stop here. Now we are going to talk about the economic prospects of our country and how it is going to compete with other giants in the world. From this slide, you have to be very careful and completely focused, because whatever things that I'm going to say will be of immense importance for your prelims when they are giving you confusing statements like it is continuously increasing or decreasing kind of thing. When it is asking about status, normally UPSC has exhausted asking question about the very basics. Normally they used to ask very basics, and once in a while they'll be asking about whether one particular thing is continuously increasing or decreasing, one particular economic statistic, whether the fiscal deficit of India is increasing or decreasing, whether the export sector is increasing or decreasing, everything. So now they, in the new pattern, they started asking some analytical questions in more frequency. So you have to be very careful. Now we'll be going to see about this, the economy's explosive growth in the upcoming decades. Let us have a comparison. This is also very, very important. Like as I said, each and every information that I'm going to say will be of immense importance for your prelims and for mains, for writing like points and examples with data. Just have a comparison about the GDP. India is having around 3.73 trillion GDP. I mean, that much dollar. Now you compare India with USA. They are around 9 times more bigger than India. China is around 6 times more bigger than India. Then Germany and Japan, they are of almost comparable size, which will be overtaking soon. Okay, they are of like just above 4 trillion and India is close to 4 trillion. So we'll be surpassing them in the GDP growth soon. Now just have a look at the snapshot of Indian economy. This is from the last year's economic survey. First understand this, then you will be able to compare it with this year's economic survey. Okay, let us see the different prospects of, I mean, different sectors of Indian economy or the performance of different economic indicators. Fiscal deficit. Now this is from where you will be getting statements. Normally people will be studying about repo rate, reverse repo rate and other kind of thing, inflation, deflation kind of thing. But when they start asking about the fiscal deficit, when they start asking about the employment, when they start asking about the services export or industrial growth or the contribution of agriculture, foreign exchange reserves, it's statistics. What is the statistics of this particular thing? Okay, forex reserve compared to 2012 or the last decade, how it is performing, whether it is continuously increasing or decreasing, or they'll be asking about some recent trends and all. At this particular statement, you will be caught. If you are able to tackle these particular areas like trends kind of thing, you will be having an extra edge above the others, because I'm very sure that people are like normally not able to remember all these kind of thing, but it is very easy if it is taught in an easier manner. You just see, normally we just need to know a very like surface view trend. Like you need not remember whether it is 4.7 or 6.4 like that. You just need to have a surface view understanding of these things. Just see, from 2019-20, that means just before the COVID-19, we had a fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit means what? The kind of money that we will be borrowing for meeting our expenses. Like when our revenue is short, okay, we are not getting sufficient revenue, you need to borrow from someone else to meet your debt. Okay, so 4.7% of the GDP was borrowed before COVID-19 to meet our debts, okay, to meet our expenses. What is that? Like, how can we imagine this thing? Like normally when we say like 4.7%, people feel like it's complicated. Like 4.7 of GDP means what? It's like normally people are not able to visualize this thing. But think in this line, we have already seen that India's GDP is around 3.7 trillion, right? So 4.7% of this 3.7 trillion, that much money will be borrowing for meeting our expenses. Now you just see, because of COVID-19, it shot up because revenue was less during COVID-19. So we had to borrow more. Okay, so it rose to 9.2% of that 3.7 trillion. That much money we borrowed for meeting our expenses, for meeting our debts and all. Then when the lockdown started getting, like when the economy started slowly opening up, it slowly decreased, and now it is at 6.4% of GDP. That much fiscal deficit. You see this trend. Now when you start discussing about inflation, we know that normally we discuss about consumer price inflation and wholesale price inflation. Normally you get questions like this. Wholesale price inflation is always above consumer price inflation. Like you may be knowing about a little bit of it, but when they are asking question about like wholesale price inflation is always above like CPI, or CPI is always above WPI, like that. At the exam hall, you will be confused, like what is the answer. Just see that it is not, it is an economic indicator, so it cannot be constant, it cannot be something, cannot be always above something or something like that. Before COVID-19, the wholesale price inflation was around 1.7%. During COVID-19, when the supply chains were curtailed, when ships were not coming, where flights were not coming, like we were not having raw materials for our production. Okay, so because of that, the wholesale, like production was not happening, and wholesale price inflation got to a historic high of 13%. Now consumer price inflation before COVID-19, if it was at 4.8%, now it is around 6.8%, but still wholesale price inflation is above consumer price inflation. Okay, CPI. So understand this trend. Now if you are thinking about services, industries and agriculture, there can be question like service sector growth is always positive. Normally we have a feel that India is a country which focuses on services sector, and we normally, when you are getting such a statement, we'll feel that okay, services sector is always showing a positive growth. No, during COVID-19 it even went to a negative close 8%. Okay, negative 7.8% it went. Otherwise it was positive. It is showing around 9% growth like per year, that is there. Then industrial growth, normally our industrial performance, our manufacturing sector performances are very weak. Okay, so even before COVID-19 it was at negative shade. Okay, now during COVID-19, like just after COVID-19, 2021, 22, when the lockdowns were lifted, it immediately rose to a 10.3%. But even after that, then slowly it got reduced. I mean, its prospect got reduced. 1 second. Yeah, now it is at 4.1%. That means the performance of industrial sector is around half than compared to services sector. It is at 9%, it is just above 4%, right? So this is there, you have to keep that in mind. Then if you are thinking about agricultural sector, it is showing a consistent performance, but not a good performance, but a consistent performance between 3 to 5%. Okay, but this statistic is also very important. Even during COVID-19, where the services sector fell negative, when the industrial sector fell negative, agricultural sector showed positive performance. It did not went negative. Even though the growth was less compared to the pre-COVID period, it was positive, like to the tune of 3%. Now when you are asked about foreign exchange reserves, so it is actually showing a continuous improvement. Okay, now this was 2022-2023 data. At the end of 2023, now it is around 620 billion. Okay, our forex reserves. So this data also you have to remember. So that was about the internal economy of India, our fiscal deficit, our export performance kind of thing. Now the international organizations or institutions like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, etc. are like expecting very huge or big about India's growth. That is, like Morgan Stanley is telling that India will be achieving a 5 trillion economy target by financial year 28. We have seen that the performance of Germany and Japan is just below 5 trillion. That is around 4 point something trillion. When we reach 5 trillion mark, that means when our present GDP is rising from 3.7 trillion to 5 trillion, we will be surpassing Germany and Japan, and we will be reaching a third spot. Okay, and that's according to Morgan and Stanley, and they are telling that when we are at the third position, when our economy, our GDP is reaching 5 trillion, Maharashtra and Uttar Pradesh, their like gross state domestic product, that is, when we talk about our country, we talk about GDP. When we talk about a state, we talk about GSDP. Okay, gross state domestic product. That will be reaching a mark of 500 billion. Okay, so that they will be leading India to reach a 5 trillion GDP mark. So that's according to Morgan and Stanley. Now we are talking about, if you are talking the estimate or projection of Goldman Sachs, India will be reaching even above USA when we reach 2075. Okay, by that time, India's economy will be 52 trillion. Okay, US will be just below India with 51 point something trillion, and China will be the first, 57 trillion. So this can be the question, you can write about this thing in the mains answers. Okay, about the economic prospects of India. So this is there. Now when if India is achieving a 5 trillion mark by financial year 28, at 2075 it will be at 10 times more. Okay, from 5 trillion to 50 trillion, right? So you should have a overall idea like this. Even though you are not remembering the exact figure, you should have, okay, India will be 10 times bigger in 2075 compared to the 2028 performance. Now, if you are comparing this with a World Bank report, okay, you can see that this GDP can be measured in two ways. One is purchasing power parity basis, then nominal GDP. Nominal GDP means according to market exchange rate, $1 is equal to 70 rupees. Okay, this is nominal GDP. I mean, when we are measuring GDP at a market exchange rate, but purchasing power parity means you will be measuring the purchasing power of one currency. That means if you are having 100 rupees, how much quantity of a basket of goods that you can purchase. Now you will be comparing this to US dollar. With $1, how much things can be purchased to a home. Okay, when you are measuring this purchasing power parity, if like at present, even at present, India's GDP is having third spot in the world. But when we are taking the nominal GDP, this blue is GDP measured on purchasing power parity terms, and this red is GDP measured on market exchange rate, or without considering the inflation or living cost. When we are not considering the living cost or the inflation of the currency, India is at the fifth spot. That means this is one. This is the like nominal GDP mark. USA is having first position. China is having the second position. Third is Japan. This is India. Third is Japan. Fourth is Germany. Fifth is India. Okay. But when it is measured on purchasing power parity, that means when you are measuring the potential of a currency by comparing the living cost, if India, when it is compared on the nominal GDP rate, it is at fifth position, like it is having the fifth position. But when it is compared on the basis of living cost, if it is at the third position, that means the living cost in Germany and Japan is more than that in India. Okay, you got the point. India on the purchasing power parity based GDP, if it is even now at a better position than Germany and Japan at the third spot in the world, that means this is because the living cost in India is less compared to Germany and Japan. Okay, that's the output that you have to learn from that slide. And the economic biggies of the world are having very high expectations about India, whether it is Elon Musk or Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. So according to Asian Development Bank, India's GDP will be growing at this pace. Okay, 8.9% growth was there in 2021. Now 2022 a minor decrease. Then by 2023, 2024 and 2025, in the upcoming years, Asian Development Bank is expecting a very high growth rate for India's GDP to the tune of 8%. So if that is happening, India will be achieving a 5 trillion economy market, position by 2028. Now, how is this possible? Like when global biggies like Morgan and Stanley or Goldman Sachs or Asian Development Bank is expecting India to grow more, like where are this money coming from? Okay, we need money, okay, to get better GDP. We need to have more investment kind of thing. One evidence for that is the performance of our stock exchange. India's stock exchange is rising 11% per year. What is a stock exchange? Stock exchange is an area where in Indian companies, foreign companies will be coming and investing. Okay, so in TCS or Infosys, if some Bill Gates or Zuckerberg is coming and investing, that will be happening in like stock exchange. And when stock exchange is growing 11% per year, that means there is a 11% increase in the investment that is coming to India per year. So that is one indicator that India is growing. Now let us compare the growth of different economies. Like we saw from the first slide that when we are comparing the growth of India, we were comparing that with China and US. So what happened to other countries? So we'll see that when we are taking the case of growth of GDP, not the amount of GDP, we have seen that if you are taking the amount of GDP, India is in the fifth position. US first, China second, then Japan, Germany, then India. But when we are talking about the growth of GDP, okay, last year we produced 100 rupees, this year we are producing 107 rupees. This is growth, okay, 7% growth. So when we are taking the growth of GDP, India is the fastest growing country in the world. Now we'll see who are at the other position and what is happening with other countries. If you are comparing that, if If you're taking the case of Russia, in the case of growth, GDP's growth, not the amount of GDP, but the GDP's growth, Russia is showing a negative 2% growth. And it is at the 48th position, 43rd position. And Japan is showing a positive growth, but less than 2%. And it is at the 19th position in the world when comparing the GDP growth. But when we are taking the case of GDP numbers, it is at the 3rd position, right? So when you are getting some statement, you have to be very careful. Whether they are asking about the absolute GDP numbers, that means India is at 5th position. But when they are talking about GDP growth, that percentage of growth, India is at the 1st position. Now about South Korea, it is showing just about 2%. And Saudi Arabia, from here you have to be very careful. Like you won't be expecting some countries like Saudi Arabia or Ireland or Indonesia to be growing as fast as India. Okay, so you have to be very careful. Otherwise, you will not be like picking these names from the statements that you are getting. Saudi Arabia is at the 5th position in the growth of GDP, and they are having just below 4%, 3.6%. Now you are taking the case of Ireland. Normally, we are not talking about Ireland, but it is having a very high growth potential, and not potential, it is growing at 4% per annum. And if you are talking about China, it is close to 5%, but less than 5%, 4.4%. Now Indonesia, again another unexpected name. Okay, normally we don't talk about Indonesia, Ireland, etc., but just below India it is growing. Okay, 5%, close to 5% it is growing. Indonesia is growing, and India is the fastest growing economy in the world according to IMF data that we are talking. It is growing at 6%, but according to Asian Development Bank, it will be growing at 8% in the future. But that percent it is growing at 6% per annum. Growing means growth in GDP. We are talking. So that is there. Now, why is India the fastest growing economy in the world? Let us see the performance of 2023. Like we have just crossed the 2023 milestone. What are the achievements that India made in 2023 for like talking about this thing? Okay, as a testimonial to our India's growth, we will be seeing some of the achievements that we achieved in 2023. First thing, Gaganyaan test vehicle. We are going to launch our like astronaut to space, and for that we have tested the space vehicle for that. Then we have developed a small satellite launch vehicle. Okay, normally we used PSLV or GSLV for launching this like small, even for small satellites, but after launching that will be just burned in space. So like complete waste of money. So for small launches, we started developing small satellite launch vehicle, that is SSLV, and successfully it has launched an Earth Observation Satellite or EOS. So we have achieved that milestone. So we have reduced the space launch cost. So that particular money can be saved, and that particular money will be invested in infrastructure. The kind of infrastructure that we are creating, you just see the like new airport in Shivamogga in Karnataka. It will be rivaling even the sleekest or the finest airport in the world. So such high class airport we are making. Now there is a nuclear power plant, newly inaugurated nuclear power plant at Kakrapar in Gujarat. It has achieved criticality. Criticality means what? A nuclear power plant is achieved criticality. That means its nuclear fission reaction has successfully started. Okay, when a nuclear reactor begins its operation, it has to begin the nuclear fission, and when it achieves the first nuclear fission successfully, we'll tell that it has achieved criticality. Okay, now this is the like space of Kakrapar nuclear power plant, and you have to be mindful of the kind of nuclear power plant that we are having. Actually, there is one specialty about Kakrapar nuclear power plant. This is the first domestically built 700 megawatt nuclear reactor. Normally, we build this particular, or we manufacture this nuclear power plant from France or Russia. We'll just install it here. But this is the indigenous project. We have developed it domestically. And we are having now nuclear power plants in Kota of Rajasthan, obviously Kakrapar latest one, then Tarapur in Maharashtra, Kaiga in Karnataka, Narora in UP, and in Kalpakam in Tamil Nadu, having again Kudankulam in Tamil Nadu. So India is going to be a nuclear power. Like if you are getting mentorship in Nuclear Supplies Group or NSG, if you are getting nuclear fuel from that line, and when our 3-stage nuclear operation is also successful, we will be having a dominance in the nuclear energy generation of the world. And again, we are having the world's biggest hockey stadium, Birsa Munda International Stadium, that is of international standard, got inaugurated last year. And you see the kind of building that we are creating, just like a White House. Okay, the Martyrs Memorial or the Telangana Secretariat, you just compare it with the Kerala Secretariat. Okay, even Kerala's Secretariat is not so bad, but we are having more advanced infrastructures in different states. The kind of development that we are making is reflected in the kind of roads that we are creating, like high quality road, well planned roads. And when we are writing the economy mains answers, you will be writing about economic corridors. This is how an economic corridor look like. Economic corridor means it is an expressway, and in the circumference of all these roads you will be having big industries in future. Okay, so that's called as economic corridor. Okay, so in all the areas, in the vicinities of all these areas, you will be having big tickets industries and factories. So it is like this particular thing, Amritsar Jamnagar economic corridor is from Gujarat Jamnagar to Amritsar in Punjab, and it is the second longest expressway in the country. Then obviously India landed on moon in 2023 with the successful Chandrayaan-3 mission, and India has achieved the mightiest record of becoming the first country in the world to reach the sweet spot of the moon, that is the south pole, which is unexplored, which is not receiving sunlight. We were not knowing what is happening in the south pole, so we have first successfully soft landed in the moon in the south polar region. Now we have huge railway projects like regional rapid transport system or RRTS, which will be taking India to a high speed in the future. Then we are having Bangalore-Mysore expressway, which is also a multi-lane highway or expressway. Then our pride, our proud, the Vande Bharat, now it has expanded to 34 routes with high quality facilities comparable to an aeroplane. Now we are having Delhi-Vadodara expressway. All these examples you can remember to write in mains. Okay, normally the problem with mains answers is that people will be lacking examples, but watch this video again and again in YouTube and remember all these things so that you can have, like when we are studying with images, that will be captured in our mind better. Then we are even the Andaman Nicobar is also not excluded. In the Port Blair we have set up a high quality airport. So because of that, tourism will be progressing in the upcoming decades. Just like we had a controversy with the Maldives recently. Now at that time we were talking more about Lakshadweep, but even Andaman is coming to the limelight. So again, Kochi Water Metro last year inaugurated. It is the Asia's largest integrated water transport system. Another feather in our crown. Then we have launched the INS Vindhyagiri. Actually it is a frigate. Frigate means it's a small warship. So what are the other frigates? INS Nilgiri, INS Udaygiri, INS Junagiri, Taragiri kind of thing. And INS Vindhyagiri is the recent addition to this thing. And another warship, that is INS Androth. It is not a frigate, but it is a corvette. It is also a small sized warship, but it is designed to travel in shallow water. Okay, normally ships are meant for like water with high depth, but this can even travel in shallow water, so it can come very close to the coast. Okay, that's an advantage. Then we are having Chennai International Airport. This was also its upgradation was happened in 2023, so it is having 5-star facilities now. Again, the Hanley Dark Sky Reserve. What is a dark sky reserve? Dark sky reserve means it is an area surrounding that observatory. There will not be any artificial lighting. Okay, so you won't be having like this kind of lighthouses etc. in that particular area. You can explore the sky or astronomical things without having any light pollution, artificial light pollution. So this is the Dark Sky Reserve that also got inaugurated last year. And to develop the least developed areas like Chhattisgarh, where Naxal issues are there, we are developing East Rail Corridor in Chhattisgarh. Then we are having the world's largest liquid mirror telescope. Actually, liquid mirror telescope is having a technology to get highly precise and high quality images of the astronomical happenings. Okay, so we are having now the world's largest dedicated astronomical observatory called liquid mirror telescope, that is in this Uttarakhand region. Now, reusable launch vehicle. As we have discussed before, when we are launching a PSLV or GSLV to launch some particular satellite, after delivering that particular satellite in its orbit, this was getting burned. Now, Elon Musk had successfully demonstrated that this particular PSLV can be brought back, okay, and it can be reused. With their Falcon 9 rocket, they had demonstrated. Now, India has also demonstrated this particular thing after delivering this particular satellite, whether this particular thing can be landing just like an aeroplane. Okay, so that was also tested. So that will be like taking India to a higher business potential player in the satellite launching arena. Will be more countries will be approaching us for delivering their satellites. Now Vizhinjam project, obviously mega cranes or big ships had started reaching Vizhinjam, very near to our locality. Now big ticket, massive affordable home projects for the people who cannot afford to build their own home. This one is Asia's largest massive housing project, which happened in Telangana. So such kind of infrastructure projects are happening in India. Now, where are the money for all these developments happening? Why is India growing so fast? Let us discuss some of the reasons for that. One thing is global offshoring. Offshoring means what? Some companies in other countries, maybe China or US or Japan, they are outsourcing their work to India. For example, Apple in US or Samsung is setting up a factory in India, and they'll be bringing their semiconductors, sensors, screens, displays, everything to India, and they'll be using Indian laborers to assemble these things. Okay, because Indian laborers are cost effective, like cheap. So they'll be using India as their factory, because that particular thing is known as offshoring. They are outsourcing their work. So that is a big ticket industry. So India will be getting this much revenue. The number of people employed in India for work outside, they'll be sitting in India, but they will be working for some countries outside. So that particular number of people who are working for outside countries, that will be to the tune of 1.1 crore in the upcoming decades. Why they are choosing Indians for this assembling? Why they are choosing Indian engineering expertise? Because we are having that much skilled population. If you see all these big ticket CEOs, whether Google, Sundar Pichai or Shantanu Narayan of Adobe, these are Indians. Okay, these are Indian brains. Okay, now we are having millions of other Sundar Pichais in our country. Given very high quality education and infrastructural setup, they will be staying in India, okay, without going to somewhere else. So Indian engineers, these are Indian engineers, and they are performing well globally. If you compare the data, we are having around 15 lakh engineering students are graduated every year. Because they are not given sufficient opportunities in India, they are going abroad. Okay, now if you take the case of India's potential, our average age is just less than 29 years old. Okay, an average Indian is having this age, so that much young we are. So you can see in the like job portals and all, our people are having huge qualifications and skills. That is why these countries are using Indians to get to work for them. Okay, now when these particular people are getting high income, that will be reflected as an income in Indian households. In 2031, this is the household income map of 2031 that is expected. They are telling that 7% of the Indian households will be earning $35,000 per year in the year 2031, and our middle class, the middle class people, which is the highest number, that will be earning anywhere between $10,000 to $35,000 per year. Because we are getting more high quality jobs from other countries, and even in India, if we are provided that particular job, our household income will be rising. So that will be taking India's GDP to a higher level. If you remember the GDP equation, we are having C for consumption, I for investment, G for government expenditure, and this is for the net of exports and imports. If our population is earning big like this, our population is earning, we'll be consuming more. If you are consuming more, our GDP will be increased. Okay, that is one thing. Now our renewable energy arena is also performing very high. If you remember, we are having the targets of say 450 to 500 gigawatt of renewable energy generation by 2030, but we need an investment of 500 billion for this particular thing. For that, investment should come from somewhere. And if you are taking the case of performance of solar energy generation, we are having the 5th rank in the world, and we have increased the solar energy generation capacity to like 17 times more in 7 years. From the previous 7 years, we have increased the capacity to 17 times. So that is one thing. We are focusing on the electric vehicles and e-mobility. Like when we are focusing on renewable energy, we need to import very less coal. We need to import very less oil. Actually, import of coal and oil is the highest like expenditure in India's import bill, if you can reduce that thing through renewable energy, again that particular amount can be used for some other area to increase the investment, that will be taking India's GDP to higher level, right? Like when you are writing a mains answer, just remember the equation. Now just think about each sector, like consumption. You are having, if you want to write one example regarding that consumption point, think about the 15 million engineering graduates, high skilled graduates who are getting better income. About investment, you just think about the kind of savings that we are making in the import bill. That particular money can be used for investment, and that can reduce the government expenditure in the import bill. Okay, like that you can write. So this is one thing. Now this is how the renewable energy sector as such is performing. Like they may be asking you the statistics. You just see that the large scale solar projects is showing a downward trend. It is not growing. Like we are not like developing huge solar farms. Like in one or two cases, be it in Rajasthan or Karnataka, we are having some solar farms, but that large is the number of such large scale solar product like power projects is less. That is showing a downward trend. But rooftop solar project above the houses, that particular thing is increasing. Just remember the trend. Don't remember any numbers, but remember the trend. But the wind energy and biomass energy from 2016 onwards, it is showing a downward trend. Okay, so that particular statistics you can remember. Now based on some growth data, just compare India's growth. According to IMF data, India was actually, even some years before, India was behind UK, France, Italy, Canada, Brazil, etc. But in 2023, we have reached the 5th spot with 3.7 trillion. Now they are predicting that if India is growing at this particular growth percentage, say 6 to 8%, India in 2025 will be surpassing Germany to reach the 4th position. Now in 2027, India will be even surpassing Japan to reach the 3rd position. And by 2075, India will be overcoming USA or surpassing USA to reach just behind China. So this is the growth potential, and this is because Indians' income is increasing in many ways. One particular graph that shows this is this. Like if you remember, we had a financial crisis in 1991, 1992. Okay, because of that we have opened up our economy, liberalization. Okay, after 1992. At that point, even before opening our economy, an average Indian was earning, this is showing the per capita GDP, that is how much an average Indian is earning. It was around $1,000 in that particular year. But now it has slowly started increasing, and by 2030, we will be having around $12,000. $12,000 means you can just calculate $1 is equal to 70 rupees. So $12,000 means 12,000 into 70. That much income an Indian will be earning by 2030. But even now, you just take the case of, you should start reading graph. Like you should be able to understand how a graph, like how to decipher information from the graph. If you are taking the case of say 2015, 2020, between 2022 and 2020 and 2025, we are now, that is at 2023, and 2023, we are, an average Indian is earning around $9,000. That means 9,000 into 70 rupees. That much income an average Indian is earning now, but that will be rising to a tune of like $12,000. That means from 1990, will be an average Indian would be earning 12 times more in 2030. Right? This can be a statement. Okay, that particular thing you have to remember. Now, if you are talking about the history during the Mughal rule, that is in 1600, 1700 kind of thing, that particular time, this red line is China, this black line is India. During the Mughal period, even India was having more GDP than China. Okay, India was a biggest giant in the global economic arena in 1700. But from 1800, from 1700 to from that particular era, British had conquered India. Okay, because of that, they focused only on their products. So Indian economy started going below everyone. So that was happening between India and China. And this is thing and when we reached 1990s, etc., our global GDP contribution was just less than 1%. Okay, that particular thing you have to remember. At this stage, we were having a huge dominance in global GDP. We were contributing lot, maybe more than 10% of global GDP. But like when we reached 1993, after the independence, after the British leaving India, our contributions to the GDP was less than 1%. So we went below China. But even then, if you compare between India and China, at the point of 1990, where this liberalization was happening, just before that, India was above China. Okay, in terms of per capita GDP, an average Indian was earning more than a Chinese before 1990. But in 1990, we had a financial crisis. After that, India was not able to match China. So that particular gap between India and China has widened since then. Why China was able to achieve this much growth after 1990? Because they had introduced the economic reforms in 1978, around 13 years before India. India had introduced the economic reforms after 1990, that liberalization, but China had did in 1978. So the result of that particular liberalization came in China by the year 1990. After that, China was growing much higher than India. But slowly, India will be overtaking all other countries and will be reaching to the second position in the future. So that is one thing. Now, at present, we told that in 1990, India's contribution to the world GDP was less than 1%, but now India's contribution to the GDP is around 3.6%. You should have a glance of this particular statistic. When we see that USA is having the contribution of 1/4 of the global economy, that is around 23% or 25% of the global economy is contributed by USA. That is 1/4 of the global economy is held under their hand. Then China is having 15% of the global share, Japan 5%, Germany just below 5%, and India around 4%. So this is the share of world's GDP contribution by biggies. And when we compare the position of stock market of our country, I mean compared to other countries, USA is the first, China second, Japan third, and India is having the fourth position in the global stock exchange. So that is one thing. Now, if you take the case of export of goods and services, export is contributing around 25% to Indian GDP. Okay, we have seen the particular GDP equation: consumption, investment, government expenditure, nets of export and import, and this particular area, export, is contributing to 25% of India's GDP. So that is one thing. And because of that, India's share of global export rose from around 1.9% in 2012 to 2.4% in 2022. That means India's export has grown by around 73% in one decade. This can be a statement-based question. So that's why I am asking you to watch this video many times in YouTube. Then, one important thing that you have to remember is the GDP equation. Always remember the GDP equation. In that, I've told you about consumption, that investment, then government expenditure, and then export and import. We are now talking about export and import. But even if the export sector is going weak, India will not be worried, because India is a domestic demand-driven economy. Whatever we are producing in our country, though nobody else is purchasing it, our population will purchase it. Okay, India is a demand-driven economy. This is the factor, consumption, that is contributing maximum to India's economy. But other countries, be it China or Thailand or Vietnam or Malaysia or Singapore, which are our competing players, they are export-driven economy. So if something is happening in other countries, if there is a global economic recession, these countries will be affected, because export will be reducing. They are more focusing on export, but India will not be affected, because India's 60% of the GDP is contributed by the purchase and the domestic consumption. Okay, in that particular equation, 60% of the GDP, all this is totaling to GDP. Okay, this particular single thing is contributing 60%. That means if nobody else is purchasing our products, we will be purchasing. So that's why recession kind of thing will not be affecting India. But this is not the case of China. If you see this is the Chinese growth graph. Between 2000 and 2010, they on average achieved a 10% rise in their GDP. But this was focused on exports and investment. Actually, what is the reason? You just tell me, if one particular country's population is young and another country's population is aging, okay, like elders are there in particular country, which country will be consuming more? The young populated country, right? So, but China is actually aging. By 2035, it is expected that around 30% or 35% of their population will be above 60 years. But at that time, India will be having more than 50 crores of our population less than 20 years. So China, if they have to grow, they have to rely on export. They have to send their things to India or some other countries. This was happening because of globalization between 2000 and 2010. But after that, if you see, their particular graph is reducing. Their GDP is not growing, but it is decelerating because there was a financial crisis in 2008. There was a global recession on that particular thing. So no other countries were purchasing their products like before. So because of that, their particular this thing was not happening. Export and import, this was their focus. This reduced, so their GDP started reducing. You're getting the point, right? But this will not be happening in countries like India. So many reports are telling that the biggest problem with Chinese economy is that their growth is unstable, unbalanced and unsustainable. How we can understand this? Just take the case of a imaginary country like called Toyland, not Thailand. It's an imaginary country called Toyland. They are manufacturing toys. Okay, they are focusing on an export-driven model. Their only business is toys, toy manufacturing. They will be exporting these toys to all other countries, and using that they will be growing its GDP. But what happens in a particular year? There is a sudden less demand for their toys. Maybe a new variety toy might have reached the global market, or there is a global recession where people priority changed to food consumption. Like if you don't have money to buy food, you won't be buying toys, right? So that is because of that particular thing. This particular country was putting all their eggs in one basket, toys. But that will be dependent on the other countries' growth as well. If other countries are having sufficient money, then only they will be buying their products. Similarly, that happened to China. China was only focusing on exports because their population is not that buying their products because their consumption is less, because they are aging. So because of that, their growth was less. But India is more focusing on the consumption market. Our products are bought by our own population. Even this is the case of US as well. You can see that this is the graph of US consumption. The percentage of their GDP contributed by consumption is close to 70%. That means in that GDP equation, 70% of the GDP of US is consumed by, that particular like growth in GDP is contributed by the consumption. Whatever thing they produce, their people will buy them. Okay, so they need not worry about export kind of thing. So because of these things, USA was not affected by recession. Recession means other countries will be less importing from other countries. Because of this particular phenomenon, because of the 70% of their GDP is contributed by their own population, they were not affected by recession. Now you can see this graph we have already seen. India also will not be affected by recession because Indians' income is growing at an average of 5.3% per annum, and by 2031 it will be tripling to reach around $12,000 per annum. An average Indian will be earning $12,000. This is 11,000. This is 13,000. Mid is 12,000 by the year 2030. So India will be consuming more, and moreover that India is having a single national market now, because a person sitting in the Kanyakumari can buy things from Kashmir using the mobile application like Amazon or e-commerce or e-nam, etc. So whatever you are producing, your population will be buying it, and this is facilitated by India's financial players like public sector bank, private sector bank, even the NBCs. They are having their own apps, mobile banking apps like Yono app or Cybernet or Fed Mobile kind of thing. So because of that, this business is actually proliferating. And India, not only, like we were now talking about the consumption, now let's talk about the investment. We are investing massively in the infrastructure. If you take the case of highways, from 2010 to 2022, we have almost doubled the kilometer of roads. It was 71,000 kilometers in 2010. Per year, we have added 10,000 kilometers of road in every year. Now we are having like 1,41,000 kilometer road. Actually, if you know these statistics, you will be having better marks in prelims, because when these statements are asked, nobody will be knowing the kind of extent of kilometers. Like even if you are not knowing, we are having around 1.5 lakh kilometers of road, like we will not be able to solve that particular statement. Okay, we'll be thinking, are we having this much, or this is huge? You can have confusion, but this is the statistics, and this particular investment component is also increasing because of that, and we are like creating more high quality infrastructure like airports, etc. But the problem is that after the financial crisis, slowly the investment started decreasing. Here we talked about transport investment in transport sector, but investment means not only investment in transport sector. There are other areas, healthcare like investment, educational investment, other industrial investment, but that is reducing after the financial crisis of 2008, 2010, etc. Even the public investment and private investment is reducing. You can see that the consumer confidence started decreasing after the financial crisis. Even you can see that after 2010 and all, that was decreasing. Even the business confidence also started decreasing, but now it started increasing because of the improvement in ease of doing business and all. So that is happening. Now another area where India is beating the world is the digital payments. Okay, using the unified payment interface or UPI, we are able to seamlessly transfer money from one place to another place in seconds. In 2022, actually, we have transferred around 1 trillion worth of dollars in through these retail payments or online transaction. That is 1/3 of India's GDP. That much amount of transaction was done through UPI. So this like thing you can remember. Then when we are talking about the digital adoption of India, digitization of India, though our score is less. Maybe if you are taking the case of South Korea, they are having 75 in the score. If you are taking the case of score, they are having 75, but we are having 32. But this is the absolute score. But the growth, if you are seeing, when compared to 2014 and now we are at 2023, from our 2014 score, we have improved our score by 90%. Now, just below Indonesia. Indonesia has improved their score by 99% compared to 2014. We have improved our score by 90%. So this is there. So India is getting digitized fastly than other countries. So that is one thing. And reports are telling that if the digital economy is improving, that will be improving the productivity of workers. That will be helping the government to transfer the payments, the subsidies, pensions, etc. like within fraction of time. That means without the help of any middlemen, people will be getting all the money in their hands. Okay, even the like small scale people, MSMEs, the farmers, everybody will be having their pension, their subsidies in their hand, because of this UPI, Google Pay, Phone Pay, etc. everybody is now used to this retail payments. So because of that, the money will be seamlessly, without friction, will be moving from one place to another place. That will be improving our growth prospects. Now we'll be finishing this soon, and we'll be talking about the contribution of services and manufacturing sector. If you take the case of Indian GDP, in the time of say 2010, we were having, our GDP was at 1.5 trillion, just above 1.5 trillion. But now we are around 3 trillion, 3.7 trillion. So in one decade, our GDP had jumped to 78%. That means just above 1.5%. I mean, just above 1.5 trillion. That is close to 2 trillion to about 3 trillion we have grown. So what are the contributions of services and manufacturing sectors in this? If you are taking the case of service sector, it is contributing to around 48% of India's GDP. Now, when we are taking the case of export, our total export, if you are exporting one particular good worth, if you are exporting a basket of goods worth 100 rupees, 40% of that, 40 rupees will be coming from the export of services. Maybe software, tourism, education and health kind of thing. Because of that, India is contributing 4.5% of the global services export. Previously, one decade before, it was 3.2%. Now, why? What are the services export? Software development, customer services, business process outsourcing, BPO or IT services, etc. But there is one problem with the services sector, that is it is employing just 50 lakh people. That is, I'm talking specifically about IT industry. It is just giving employment to 5 million people. That is, we are having 140 crore population. Out of that, around 90 crore people are in the working age, that between 15 to 64. But only 50 lakh are getting job in IT industry. Because of that, we have to focus on manufacturing sectors. In IT industry and services sector, only educated people can work. Okay, white collar jobs. But we have to now focus on less skilled and like jobs that can be done by anyone. That is blue collar jobs on manufacturing sector. If you take the case of India, out of the 140 crore population that we are having, 90 crore are in the working age. That is between 15 to 64 years. Out of that, half, 45 crore people are in the labor force, working or searching for work. Out of that, only 6 crore people are getting formal jobs. That means a monthly salary, a proper leave, proper pension, PF kind of thing. Okay, so this cannot be done. The remaining people cannot be employed only in IT sector or services sector. For that, we have to grow more factories and we have to be the manufacturing hub of the world. At present, our manufacturing sector is contributing to just 17 to 18% of the GDP. Like when we talked about services sector, it was contributing to 48%. Okay, many times more than this thing. So this has to be like we have to overcome that particular thing. And in the manufacturing sector, we have to understand that some sectors, electrical machinery, like vehicle manufacturing, pharma products, they are actually growing better, but not other sectors. So we are now expecting that because of our initiatives like Making in India kind of thing, we will be improving our manufacturing sector to 21% of our GDP. At present, it is 17 to 18% of our GDP is contributed by manufacturing sector, but 2031 will witness 21% of the contribution by manufacturing sector. For that, we have introduced Make in India kind of thing, but we have to participate more in global trade by using our Make in India thing, our production linked incentive scheme, etc. We have to export more. So that then only our Make in India will be fruitful. For that, we are having our big ticket companies like Adani, Reliance, Tata, etc., which are now planning to invest around 250 billion in the manufacturing sector. That will take India to a new height. Actually, we know that previously all these companies were there in China, but now they are shifting their base to India because more investments are coming to the Indian manufacturing sector. So that will take India to a new height. But we talked about the industrial services sector kind of thing, but this is physical investment. But the major problem is that most of our population are not having proper education, lack of skills kind of thing. Our population are unemployable. What is the solution for that? How can we improve our human capital? We know that India has already overcome China in terms of population. When we reach 2100, China's population will be reducing and there will be only 80 crore people in China. But India will be having 160 crore people, 1.6 billion people in 2100. So what happens to these people? How much education that they are getting? Are they getting skill, education kind of thing? That will determine India's growth. If they are not getting proper education or skill, they can be becoming criminals or something else. So that will be decelerating India's growth. At present, India's GDP, I mean, Human Development Index score, we are having a rank of say 132 out of 191 countries. Even in the terms of education, health, etc., in human development, we are below Sri Lanka, China, Bhutan, Bangladesh, etc. This has to change. Okay, because like why this is happening? Why we are at such a low score? Because our contribution to the education is less than 3% of the GDP. Okay, even like before, during the Congress rule in 2009, etc., we were having around 3.4% of the GDP contributed to the that meant expenditure we are spending in the education sector, but now it is less than 3%. This is happening. So 2.9% of the GDP is only contributed to education. Because of that, we are having high unemployment rate. Around 7 to 8% of the overall population are unemployed. So this is an overall unemployment. But when we are taking only the case of youth, that is between 20 to 24%, our unemployment score, I mean percentage is more than 40%. That means When you are educated, 20 to 24 means you will be having your graduation kind of thing. When you are educated, you will be expecting high paying jobs. You will not be like accepting low menial jobs, etc. Because of that, our educated population unemployment rate is greater than 40%. That means if you are having 100 people highly educated, 40 people are still unemployed. So that thing should change. So we know that China, Vietnam, Philippines, etc. are aging. If we want to capture the market of global economy, we have to improve our score in human development indices, like in health, education kind of thing. We have to increase our investment in this area. So India is having high growth potential in many aspects, but our government has to reduce the corruption. We have to invest more in skill development. We have to invest more in education. We have to improve the quality of life of the people. Then only we'll be achieving this second position in 2075. So with that, we'll be winding up. We'll meet with the next episode.